Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Sunday morning chat today is going to be about anticipation. What we can expect from our plants. Now, if you've got a brand new plant, possibly in bloom, all you can hope and expect is that it's going to do it again. That's really why we have our orchids in the first place. But there's quite a few different types of orchids in here, some of which I've had a long time nowadays. I don't need to expect anything from them. I know what they're going to do and when they're going to do it because I've had them a long time. But we get new orchids in. I'll pick a classic example. My latest Merrily that I got on our trip to Burnham's. Now, I can expect what this is going to do because I've got other Merrilies and some of those I've had a long time. So I know what they do. Now this one's in bloom, or just going over now, and I suspect that was forced into bloom out of season. Yeah, and that happens a lot with both Merrily type dendrobiums and the Phalaenopsis type. You can buy a Phalaenopsis type and a Merrily type in full bloom at any time of year. Now that's not what they're supposed to do. So you can expect that to change. If you buy a Merrily or a Phalaenopsis type in full bloom in August, you can expect that it isn't going to do that again, yeah, because that's not what they do. Most of the Merrily types are late winter, early spring bloomers following some form of winter rest. It doesn't have to be extreme with the hybrids, the Merrilies I'm on about now. But what can I expect from this? When I got this, I had a couple of chopped off canes. They do that in the shops, flipping nuisance. And a damaged new growth that's going to do nothing. That will never grow. But what it will probably do, I can expect, is push out another new growth from this bulbous area here. I've got one little new growth here pushing on. I would expect, because this was pushed into bloom out of season, that cane might not mature properly this year. If I get a new one here, it might do. So what can I expect from this? Bearing in mind it was repotted, root disturbance, yeah? And at the moment I've got no new roots growing. So this is now set back. It's been stalled. It's not going to perform as well as it could do. So that's what I can expect from this one. What I can hope to do is get at least another one new growth, maybe two, depends what goes on where they've chopped these canes off. They can often shoot out following that. I can expect these larger bulbs to desiccate a little bit, lack of new roots and root disturbance, so less hydration than it was used to prior to me getting hold of it and repotting it. Yeah. As far as reblooming is concerned, the two canes that were in bloom when I've got it have not bloomed on every single node. So I would expect that next spring, possibly a little later than its normal period, it may push out some blooms from the nodes it didn't use this time round. That's what I can expect or hope for. It's a slight difference, I suppose. But that's a new orchid, so it's very similar to other orchids I've got, so I can expect it to behave in a similar manner. The difference with this one will be that it was in bloom out of season. And it may take this year, and possibly next year as well, to kick back into blooming at the proper time. To do that, it also needs strong new growths, yeah, which it might not get this year. So if this doesn't produce a nice big fat cane like these two this year, I won't be disappointed because I can expect that's probably what it's going to do. So that's a Merrily type. As I've got one here, Miltoniopsis. Yeah, I can expect these not to do as well as they could do in my environment during the summer. It's too flipping hot for them, they don't like it. But nonetheless, they survive. And what I can expect from this one is, this was a gift. I think I took an old bulb off when I first repotted it. It's recently repotted, it doesn't now need doing again for a while. What I can expect from this is for these absolutely gorgeous blooms to last a while. So I always go the wrong way with the camera. Let me just turn it a bit. There we go, that's a bit better. So what I can expect from this is these blooms to last a reasonable amount of time, and then eventually they will go. Miltoniopsis come into the Oncidium alliance, although they're a more distant cousin than a lot of them. So what will happen with this then? It's unlikely that this latest growth that's bloomed will push out any new growths until those blooms drop. Now some do. Some will start a new growth while the blooms are still there. Most don't. So if it pushes out a new growth, that will be a little bit exceptional. If it pushes out its new growth probably 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, depending on its vigour, after the blooms drop, that's what I would expect it to do. Yeah? If I go 3 months after these blooms have dropped and I still haven't got a new growth, then it's behaving odd. And if it's behaving odd, I have to question, is it me? Is there something not quite right? Because that's not what this plant should do. The only way you can really get to know what a plant ought to do is to own them for a while, or have quite a few of them, different sort of types, things like that. So what I will expect from this one is the blooms to do well, which they are. I'd like to let them have that for Malvern, but I'm not going to. I would think the plant's health would suffer by going to Malvern, and probably shorten the life of those blooms considerably, if not actually lose them during the actual show, so they're not having it. But new growths will come from here sometime in the future, so I know what to expect. I'll take the next one on the shelf, which is Shelob Tolkien. I've owned this quite a while. This is nothing like the plant I once had. In fact, it's a seriously diminished version of the plant I once had, because I split it. And the other piece went to somebody else in the Orchids to go phase last time round. So somebody else has got one of these. I hope theirs is blooming as well. I don't know. Nobody tells me these things. But what to expect from this one? What I expect this one to do is what it always has done. And it actually blooms before the bulbs are fully mature. Yeah? So it's an Oncidium type, heavy on the brassia, hence the spidery look. There's other stuff in there as well. So Bratonia, so it's got Miltonia in, and brassia in there, I suspect. Probably both hybrids, not species. So it's a sort of more complex cross. But that's what this one does. It pushes up the new growth, and before it's mature, it pushes its spike out. If you're lucky, you might get 2. Have I ever had 2 on one bulb? Can't remember. But then, while these blooms are out, the bulb will carry on growing and gradually get fatter, and gradually mature, and probably won't finish and get to full maturity until long after the blooms have gone. It's still growing, still pushing out the leaves, it's expanding. Yeah? And the next thing it will do, once these growths are mature, is push out some more. Yeah? And it may push out 2. It might only push out 1, as it did before. 1 went that way, 1 went that way. Prior to that, it did produce 2 at some point, otherwise I wouldn't have 2 leads on the same linked rhizome, would I? And what I've just noticed here, I think, it might not mature, but down in there, on the end of my finger, is a sign of a new growth. Now that's not on the latest growth, that's on the previous one. Now that might not push, that could be a dormant eye that's never going to grow. But it's there. So, in anticipation, it would be nice if it grew. But I wouldn't expect it to. It's too far back from the main lead. But it might do. Yeah. So that's sort of getting into the anticipation and the sort of thinking about what a plant ought to do next. And when you've had a plant a really long time, you can anticipate. Now, this is a new plant. I haven't had this one long. And this is Cuthbertsonii crossed with, I think it's Sulawesi, I think is the other one in there, that I know absolutely nothing about, and I haven't looked it up. I don't need to. Not yet. I might have to one day, but at the moment I'm quite happy that it's similar enough to Cuthbertsonii to make a valid cross, yeah, and probably grows in an incredibly similar manner. Now, I haven't had Cuthbertsonii as long, so in anticipation, it looks like the canes have to get fully matured, yeah, sounds reasonable, with a pair of leaves at the top and no more leaves coming. And at that point, the bud comes out. That's what I can see from what I've got. So what else have I got on this plant? On this plant, I've got a cane there that could bud, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 quite strong, oh, 5, 6 quite strong new canes pushing up here that have not finished growing. They've still got leaves pushing out, so they're going to get longer, they're going to get bigger. Yeah, that's the size of the canes that are in bloom. That's the size of these canes now, and they're going to get bigger. Are they going to be blooming size? Simple answer, of course they are. It's a blooming size plant now. So when all of these canes mature and they get their final pair of leaves, I can anticipate that each one of them may produce a bud. How many buds will it produce? 1, because that's what that plant does. I don't think it ever produces more than 1 bud per cane, and probably only once, and then that cane's finished. So that's anticipation based on assumption, not based on fact or history or the fact that I've had the plant ages and know exactly what it's going to do next. But I bet it's a pretty good guess. Assumption, sorry. Mustn't admit to guessing, must we? But we do. Of course we do. That's that. We'll get down Mr. Hairy, because I don't think Mr. Hairy's been filmed lately. Now, I can't say I've had this plant ages because I haven't. I have had Dendrobium senile for ages, but the one I had that was, I think, got to its 3rd year and just keeled over and died. And I'm still not absolutely sure why, but I'm pretty sure it had something to do with trying to give it a winter rest up in the bedroom where it lost all its humidity. And it wasn't a strong plant to try and rest anyway. So what I've got here are new growths. One here, one tucked up in there. Where else? Another one over here. Another one down there. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 brand new growths just starting out. Now, I'd like to think that they're going to get as big as these 2 canes here, because this is the best 2 canes this plant has ever had, and they're last year's. Yeah, so I think those were the new growths that were on the plant when I bought it. Did I get this last year at Malvern or the year before? Can't remember. So I've either had it about a year or 2 years. I think it's 2 years actually. And what can I expect from this one? Well, first of all, I wasn't expecting it to bloom, and it looks like it's going to, because that's a bud. It might only have 1 bloom on that spike. It might branch and produce 2, but I suspect it'll only be 1. But in anticipation, these 2 canes are fully blooming size, but they're not going to do it till next year. But I suspect they will. This one, that's got a bud on it, may bud again next year. Now what about the other growths? Most of the other canes are now finished growing, like this one, this one, this one, this one over here that's dropped one of its leaves. Those are finished growing. They're not anywhere near full size. They may never bloom, but they supply photosynthesis and strength to the pieces, because this isn't one plant, don't forget, this is pieces of plants, because the one I bought turned out to be lots of little ones and not one big one. Bit of a swizz, but okay, we're getting it going now. This little growth here may continue growing a little bit longer, but what I'm looking for now is that those little tiny new growths that are just starting grow as big as that. But that's hope, not anticipation, because it obviously is capable of growing a cane that's not full size and finishing it. prior to it getting to full size. So I know roughly what to expect with this, but I can't confirm it. It could do one of several things. These little tiny new growths that are starting might not get to full size, and then they may just take off like these two did. Yeah? These older leafless canes are now not going to bloom. If they were going to bloom, they'd be doing it now. There's no sign of any buds. So as far as blooms are concerned, we're going to get one, or maybe two, and we may get some more next year from these two canes, possibly some of the others. So that's some anticipation and a little bit of hope in that one, because the blooms are gorgeous. Beautiful fragrance as well, so I really want that to do well. Let's have a look at this up here. Now this is a Miltonia. I can't remember which one. It might be Castanier, I'm not sure. Now this one had bad fusarium. Came from a nursery in Madeira. I bought 3. They were all badly infected. One was so bad it never made it. Couldn't rescue it, just died. Just failed to do anything and just keeled over. The other 2 pulled through. So I ended up with 1 bulb there, split into 2. These 2, yeah? Now this one's pushed out this strong new growth, and there's an eye at the bottom. I doubt if that will grow, yet it might do. This one, however, produced 2. One pushing on very well, one a bit behind, but they did start offset. They didn't both start together. So I've got 3 new growths on here. What can I expect from this? Well, one of these, that one, or that one of these bloomed last year, that one. There's the old spike in there, yeah? So that one bloomed, that one didn't, I don't think. Oh yes it did, yeah, they both bloomed. So both of these bloomed. So is there any good reason why all 3 of these new ones shouldn't bloom? And the answer is no. They should bloom. I can anticipate blooms from all 3 of the new growths. But they won't come out together. This is the one that's way ahead. This one next, and this one's dragging behind. Now if they're all going to bloom, which I expect they will, they'll be staggered. And this one over here would be the first one to try. Oh, I love it when a plan comes together. And it's trying quite hard. There's the spike. Are we only going to get one? On a Miltonia, probably. Now, some Oncidium types love to push out 2 spikes. Shari Baby does, yeah. But the Miltonias tends to be 1. And you can even tell which side it's going to come out by coming up from the base. You come up from the base, you get a little, like a bract leaf. Then you get one that's a bit bigger. And then on this side you get what is virtually a proper leaf. And then on the other side you get a much bigger one. Well, that's nearly always where the spike will come out. Yeah? The little tiny bract type leaves are followed by a pair of leaves, and there's always a bigger one on one side than the other, and that's the one where the spike is highly likely to come out. So coming over here, this bulb isn't mature enough to be thinking about a spike. Yet. No, that's a bulb, sorry, I thought we had another spike in there. So following it up then, we've got our little bract, slightly bigger one. First proper leaf, second proper leaf. So the spike's going to come out from in there, but not yet. These leaves haven't fully expanded and opened and started to show the bulb yet. So in anticipation, hopefully a spike on all 3 new growths. Note the roots. They've only just started. How mature is that bulb? Well, it isn't a new growth anymore, is it? And the same round here. I mean, this bulb is starting to show the actual bulb, so it's maturing. It's starting its spike, but still only just started the new roots. So on this one, in anticipation, I know that new roots come very late. They do not come out with the brand new growths. Now some Oncidiums do, this one doesn't. So that's a Miltonia, and the sort of growth that it gets up to, and the sort of things you can predict. Now let's have a look at this little Orangus, because I've had this a very long time, even though it's only tiny. that that's how big it grows. It's like looking at the plant, it looks like a bit like a tiny little phalaenopsis. But this spikes behind the fourth leaf down, so two each side. So you've got new leaf coming out at the top, the two previous leaves, and the two previous leaves before that. That's where it spikes. So where's it going to spike next year? In there, and hopefully in there too. One each side would be good. But this produced a little plantlet out the side, which these do. Now this is young, but being attached to a blooming size plant, it's still capable of blooming. Yeah, and it did. Produced a not very good, but spike. And that has a new leaf coming as well. So what can I anticipate on that? I can anticipate 2 spikes on the mother plant and possibly a slightly better one on that. When can I expect them? Exactly the same time as the year before and the year before that, and I believe the year before that. When? When it says in my notes, because my memory ain't that good. And with this number of plants, I wouldn't expect it to be. That's why I keep notes of when things open their first bloom and when they drop their last one, and that gives me how long it's going to be in bloom. Now that could be as little as less than 2 weeks, could be 3 months. Well, it's nice to know how long your blooms are going to last. So I keep notes on, you know, when the first blooms open, so that I know roughly the time of year it's going to do it again. And that will do it year on year unless the plant dies. Yeah. So predictable, totally predictable, because I've had it a while. What else have we got? Let's have a look at a Manculatorium type that nearly died. Now my anticipation on this one is that it lives, and that'll be good enough. What happened with this was it seriously objected to the heat wave last year. So longest days, constant heat, including night heat, never cooled down during that heat wave. And even though I tried to keep the humidity up, which would have helped and maybe sort of saved its bacon, I couldn't keep up with it with those old ultrasonic humidifiers. Not in here, not with the extractor fan trying to get the heat out and taking the humidity with it. So let's have a glug. More. In anticipation, I was expecting this to die, quite honestly, but I realised my mistake times 2. Nothing I could do about the first one, the heat wave, but I've done something about it now and got an industrial fogger, endearingly known as Hurricane Hector or R2D2. It sits on the floor and it does the job. A bit expensive, but it does the job. You have to look at the cost. That cost of that gadget is offset by not losing plants as a consequence of not having it. What value do you put on the plants? There's the monetary value that you spent when you bought the plant, but what about the work you put in looking after them? The length of time you've had it times that amount of work. Is there a value on that? Probably. But anyway, in anticipation of this one, what we've got is the first strong new growth up here, another one tucked in behind it, another one there, and another one there. So I've got 4 brand new growths, and they are just starting to produce new roots to replace what is nothing. Basically that was mounted with virtually no roots and quite honestly no hope. So that's a bonus. So what can I expect? These old canes lost their leaves in the heat wave. These were 3 new growths last year. This was my blooms. Well, they're not going to do it now. Those are lost. Over here, that growth has already bloomed. It may do it again, but I doubt it. At the moment, this plant is incredibly weakened because it's lost leaves. There's virtually no photosynthesis going on. Yeah? And that's important to plants, as we know. So my hope for this one is that all of these new growths mature into good sized canes like these and keep their leaves. When they get to that stage that they're fully grown and they've got their leaves on the top, normally 2, sometimes 3, they will be mature canes. There will then be a gap, because that's what the Latorias do. They seem to just sit there for a bit. Length of time unknown, because it varies, but they will sit there for a while, then they will produce a spike or two, hopefully, and they will bloom. So anticipation for blooms on this very late this year or into next year. These canes have got to fully mature, but they're giving it a good go. As I say, I've got 4 new growths on there, one of which is pushing on. The sooner I can get one of these with a pair of leaves on the top to photosynthesize, the more energy will be put into the rest of them, and the new root system pushing up from the bottom. So it will survive. That was a no-hoper in my book. I'm going to pick on this one next to it just because it's there and it's not doing what it should do. This is the Tetragonum variety Giganteum. Well, first of all, in anticipation, I really wanted to see the blooms. That's why I bought it. It wasn't in bloom when I got it, and I was really looking forward to it. My anticipation was shot to pieces because it's an alba form. That's not what I paid for, but it was grown from a seedling. And in amongst 1,000 seedlings, you might get 0 alba forms or semi-albas. You could get 10%, but you don't know till they bloom. So you can't blame the nursery. Yeah, I bought it unbloomed. So anyway, what's happening with this is it grew that cane, which bloomed. That's how I know it's not the proper one. It then grew this one, which is a good sized cane, but that leaf didn't open properly. It did that in the winter. And the only strong new growth I can see coming at the moment is this one out the side. And it's not as strong as it should be, which makes me wonder, did I get 2 little seedlings jumbled up together? But anyway, I would like to see this pushing up some more new growths, because if it doesn't, the blooms are a hell of a long way off on that one. It's difficult to say. But it's done a good root system, that it's now got. Could have done with less aerial ones and more on the mount, but it's got plenty on the mount. So this one is a wait and see. It's not quite doing what I expected. But maybe it will, later. We'll see. Okay, sorry about that abrupt ending, or rather abrupt. When I got all the clips onto the computer and started putting the video together, it's far too long. Basically, I just waffled on. Nonetheless, I don't want to waste any of it, so I'm splitting it into 2. I can't expect people to sit through a video that long in one go, but spread over a couple of days or over different time periods, you might well want to watch the other half. If you think you've seen enough of this type of video, you don't need to watch the other half. So a part 1 and a part 2, first time that's ever happened. I'm going to have to get a clock or something out here so I keep my eye on the time. Anyway, that was part 1. Part 2 will get loaded as a separate video. And thanks for your time. As I say, this one was far too long for a single video. So see you in the next one, hopefully.